Welcome to this session of the Living Your Best Life with Kidney Disease virtual forum. Thank you to Otsuka Canada and Paladin Labs for providing unrestricted financial support for this forum. Nous remercions Otsuka Canada et Laboratoire Paladin d'avoir apporté un soutien financier sans restriction à ce forum. The information presented in this virtual forum is current as of January 25th and 26th, 2022. The material shared in this presentation is not intended to be medical advice. We suggest people speak to their doctor about their own individual situation. This information is intended for a Canadian audience. Les informations présentées dans le forum virtuel sont à jour en date du 25 et 26 janvier 2022. Le matériel partagé dans cette présentation n'est pas destiné à être un avis médical. Nous suggérons aux gens de parler à leur médecin de leur situation personnelle. Cette information est destinée à un public canadien.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Living Well with a Kidney Transplant session. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land in which I live and today present from, which is Coquitlam, BC, the Coast Salish, Coquitlam, Tsleil-Waututh, Stalo, and Kikite people. We are excited to have 4 panelists with us. Today's session will allow us to hear lived experiences of kidney transplantation, from a recipient of a living donor who just received their gift of life last month, to a recipient of a deceased donor and thriving after 43 years, to cousins, one who needed a kidney and the other who was willing and able to give a new lease on life. Unfortunately, we did have Dr. Paquette, a nephrologist from Quebec who specializes in kidney transplantation, is unable to join us today as originally planned. Following these amazing speakers, we will have a question and answer session. Attendees can definitely ask those questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And I will also throw in a few questions here and there to our speakers to discuss. Now, before we get started, I should introduce myself. My name is Kate Chong. I am the Manager of Patient Services for the Kidney Foundation, BC and Yukon branch. Today, I will have my moderator hat on, but I also have lived experience with kidney disease, and I'm also a fortunate recipient of a kidney transplant from a living donor 4 years and counting. Receiving this gift has allowed me to live a very fulfilling life and allowed me the opportunity to live my dream of having my daughter. Now, let's get to hearing from our amazing speakers. Michelle, we're going to begin with you. Please share with us your transplant journey.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle. My kidney journey was a crash start in 2019. I was enjoying life, recently engaged, and had just returned home from a vacation to New Zealand with my fiance. In late June, a couple weeks after returning home from vacation, I started to feel tired and nauseous and just generally unwell. I just chalked that up to stress and went about my life for a few days. It progressively got worse, so I went to my family doctor who did some blood work and then called me the next morning to advise that I get to the emergency room right away because my kidneys were not working at all. This was the Friday of the July long weekend. I was admitted right away. No one could really figure out what was going on with a fairly healthy 28-year-old. So within a week, I had received my chest catheter and started dialysis all on the same day. And then I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Goodpasture syndrome, which ultimately attacks your kidneys and sometimes your lungs. From there, everything happened very quickly. I started plasmapheresis treatments and dialysis 3 times a week, and I was in the hospital for almost 3 weeks. I went through all of my dialysis options and ultimately decided on nocturnal home hemodialysis. I felt more independent and in charge of my own life. Doing dialysis at home gave me the freedom from the hospital that I really needed. My fiance also learned how to set up the dialysis machine, and we were a quick team each night. Fast forward to March 2020, I was doing well on home hemodialysis and had just started my transplant workup when the pandemic hit. which of course slowed everything down. I have been very open with my family and friends about my health. I think the crash start and being admitted to the hospital in 2019 really helped me be open about my journey because there was no hiding it. Thankfully, being open with my experience and what I was going through, I had 7 people offer to join the application process to test to become a donor. These were both family and friends. Through sharing my story, I learned that most people don't know that you can donate one of your kidneys. Many people were shocked when I told them that you can live a long and fulfilling life with just one kidney. Sharing my story gave people the opportunity to ask questions and volunteer without me having to have that dreaded asking for it. The start of the pandemic not only slowed down my workup, but my donors, which added to our stress. But during that time, my husband and I got married, not the way that we had originally planned, but in a small ceremony with just 2 witnesses due to restrictions. Having a strong support system definitely helped me through the entire transplant process. My friend was officially cleared as my donor in May of 2021. Thankfully, she was the first person who the transplant team started testing, so I didn't have to wait through multiple workups. We knew that the surgery would take a while to get scheduled, as surgeries had stopped during the pandemic at one point. The waiting for a date was a big mental struggle. I'm a big planner, and having to just wait for a date knowing that you had a donor ready was very difficult. Thankfully, my donor called me in late October to give me the good news. Our surgery was scheduled for December 10th. Then everything moved very quickly. I finally met the transplant team in person a week before my scheduled surgery. I, of course, had lots of questions for the nephrologist and the surgeon, but a big one that I wanted to know was how good of a match my donor and I were. If someone was going to have an elective surgery for me, I wanted to make sure we were a good match. To my surprise, my nephrologist advised that even though it was a friend who was my donor, we were somehow as good of a match as siblings normally are. Our surgery was a success, and my kidney started working right away. My donor spent 2 days in the hospital while I spent 4. We were discharged from the hospital right before Ontario changed the limitations and the visitors were no longer allowed in the hospital. A few days later, they halted non-emergency surgeries in general. We had just sneaked in. I'm so thankful to my donor and the team at TGH. Now that I have my transplant, I can look forward to more in life. My husband and I are hopefully going to have our wedding reception this May and begin traveling again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing your story with us today. An extremely exciting time now that you've had your transplant and you're heading into your next part of your kidney journey. And, you know, even though your journey so far has been quite short and sweet overall, you've had a lot happen in that short time period. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And, you know, you're fresh with the kidneys, so enjoy all those moments.
Thank you.
Yeah, now we will hear from Tom. We're going to the complete opposite here, everyone, who has had over 40 years of living with a deceased kidney, a number we don't get to see very often in the kidney community. So Tom is going to share with us all that he has seen and learned over the past 4 decades with this wonderful gift. Tom, please share us your story.
Thank you. I'll be reading it because there's so much on the paper. As you know, my name is Tom Mitrovsky. I'm 74 years old, and I'm kidney recipient for almost 43 years. My donor was from deceased. He or she are my greatest hero I had never known. They saved my life. Forever, I'm grateful for the gift of life. I was able to see my children grow into adults, and now I'm enjoying 12 grandchildren. Also, I met so many new friends in a transplant family. As a young father of 3 at age 22, I was constantly tired. At first, I was blaming this on a workload as I was working 3 jobs to support my family. Finally, I went to see a doctor. He looked at me and informed me that I was lazy. I was upset, I know myself. But I went to see a different doctor, and he Without the exam, looked at me and he said, "You have a kidney problem. You probably need either dialysis or transplant at one point at a time." So I started to work in Toronto General Hospital as orderly. To work in a hospital, you need to provide sample of blood and the urine. A couple days later, they called me and says that I have a severe kidney infection and that I even can pronounce the name. So I started hemodialysis in a hospital. So while I was in the hospital, I overheard a doctor who is also a patient that he would never ever had transplant. I was scared. He might know something that I don't. But my nephrologist comforted me and he says, it is personal choice. If the kidney, when kidney comes available, you can decide if you want it or not. So the day came, I looked at my family and I said, yes. So new chapter of my life began. I was emotional, I was scared, and after 2 months stay in a hospital, like Michelle, just a couple of weeks, I started feeling stronger, and I took family on a long-awaited vacation to Florida. As time passed by, I felt I had to contribute. As thanks to my deceased donor who I never had a chance to say thank you. I just didn't know I could write letter or not. How to say thanks for someone who gave me so many days of sunshine, so many days of happiness, is by sharing and promoting organ donation. First, support Kidney Foundation to explore ways to find a cure. Today, waiting list for diseased kidney 7 to 9 years. That's why I've become support member to inspire as a transplant and also transplant ambassador, which promote living donor. See, when you have a living donor, the waiting list is not long, and in some cases, no need for dialysis. Also, when you have a living donor, it reduces the list for those dialysis patients who are on a waiting list. Transplantation is an amazing journey. It tests the limits of human strength, courage, it requires commitment, faith, and emotional and physical endurance. If you can handle transplantation, you can conquer anything. It is life's greatest challenge, and the reward is life itself. Transplantation is not cure. It just allows us for better life. There is no 2 days they are the same. As science stands, the anti-rejection meds are for life and has many side effects. I love humor. I named my kid Jerry, so it's Tom and Jerry. I would like to take opportunity to thank my friend Lisa Han. Lisa and I were volunteers in Toronto, Ontario, promoting organ awareness in a local provincial service. And throughout talking, she introduced me to a peer support group, and I enjoyed it. I met so many new friends. Also, I want to take a opportunity to thank everyone in organizing this event. I am enjoying it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. I know for me personally, this is what I strive to get to 40 plus years with my transplanted kidney. And I'm sure there's many here that can relate to that. Your story brings such great hope to many of us who are on this journey, wherever that might be. And I think, you pointed out in your talk today, being able to see not only your children, but your grandchildren growing up, what a beautiful gift to be able to see that, and how things have changed over the time for recovery. 2 months post surgery is a big time in the hospital compared, Michelle, and I know for myself too, kind of 4 days. That's a big difference. So you can see where, recovery as continues to go, which is amazing. And I think you bring a great point too around deceased donation. There's a whole other aspect of thankfulness to the donor family, that is good to acknowledge. And then for those that are having living donors, there's different ways that we say thanks in our own way. So thank you, Tom, for being able and willing to share your story with us today. So I'm now happy to introduce our next two speakers. They'll each share their own stories, but they are connected now in a special way. Cousins who have gone through the kidney transplant process, Rena as the recipient and Cindy as the donor. Rena will start us off with sharing her story, and then Cindy can bring up her perspective of the journey as a donor. Rena?
Thank you, and thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. So when I was 25 years old, I got a sore toe. That's how it all began. And the toe wouldn't get better. And I finally went to the doctor and they said, that looks like gout, but you're 25 and you're a fitness instructor. It doesn't make sense. But there I was with gout. And then it came back again. And that's when they went, something else is going on here. And it was they thought either rheumatoid arthritis or something with my kidneys. And of course, it ended up being my kidneys. So gout was a bit of a gift for me because it told me long before that I had this disease. And then I was able to work with it and put it off for quite a long time. In that time, I had a 2-year-old daughter and I was single. So it was pretty stressful to get this diagnosis for sure. And they had said, you'll probably need a transplant within 10 years. So I had that 10 years on my mind, but I actually ended up going 25 years before needing a transplant. So over the years, I just kept hearing, keep doing what you're doing. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, which was great. And then when I was about 49, I guess I would think I was 49, is when they started saying it's maybe time to think about getting on dialysis. And frankly, I was putting it off for as long as I could. But eventually it was, I was starting to feel nauseous and whatnot. And I was at 5% kidney function at the time. So it was time. And I went on dialysis. My cousin was, of course, being worked up during this entire time. And so when I did go on dialysis, it was only for 6 weeks. So I was so lucky that I only had that short stay on dialysis because I knew for so long. So, I didn't have the same wait times. Now, I didn't go out and ask anybody for a transplant because that felt like the most awkward conversation ever for me. I think everybody can relate to that. But my big sister didn't have any trouble with it. So she sent out an email to everyone she could think of and said, Rena needs a kidney, So that was good. I did write blogs about it while I was going through everything. And occasionally, there were kind of, I don't know if I can go through this having a living donor because it's a big thing to consider. And Cindy would occasionally call me and assure me that, she knows all about it. So, we obviously went through it, and it's been going on 4 years. So just after my 50th birthday is when we were transplanted, and I say, and and it didn't take immediately. It did. I was in the hospital for 10 days as opposed to the few days that most people have, but that was a little bit of complications. But I've been living, and I think that the only way I've been able to figure out to thank a donor for something like this is to live my life as well as I can. And that's been my aim ever since, is to just live really well and be authentic to who I am. And I'm happy to do that. And and that's basically my story. So if anyone has questions, of course, they can put it in the chat for me, but I'll hand it over to Sydney when you're ready.
So I start now?
You go right ahead, Cindy. It's all yours. Share us the donor process.
Okay. I was aware just quite vaguely that my cousin Rena had kidney disease, but she was always very, very quiet about it. Very did not make a big fuss about it. She, she lived with it. She did everything she needed to do to look after herself. So it was just one of those things that was very much in. It was really not front and center. It was just something that she lived with very quietly. It was probably about 5 years ago when I got that email from her sister saying that Rena needed a kidney. And I decided to just approach it, just look and see if I would be considered to be a donor. And I know that my sister did so at the same time. And I was surprised that she was not, she wasn't able to get beyond the first stage. And for some reason, I was able to. And I started down the path. And I do know that in our area, they will only do a workup on one potential person at a time. And so I was that person for a while. I began the process. I didn't tell anybody at the beginning until probably several months into it. I told Rena's sister, the one who had sent out an email. Partly, I didn't want pressure for me. I didn't want it to become weird. I didn't want it to become weird with her, and so I just kept it to myself. A few things that I learned very early on was that the donor process is entirely separate from the process for the recipient. And I knew that their only concern was my health. So they weren't thinking, we have to rush this through to get a kidney for this person. They were looking at, they were making sure that this would be a safe thing for me to do, as safe as they could possibly make it. I also knew that if for whatever reason I became uncomfortable with it, if I realized I started down the process and I realized that, I just can't do this, or I don't want to do this, or I figure it's too risky for me, that I would just tell the donor coordinator, and she would say that I'm no longer eligible as a donor. That's how it would be framed, that I'm no longer medically eligible to donate a kidney. The testing process for me was approximately 15 months. There were a number of issues came up, blood pressure. My blood pressure was a little bit of a concern, and so I had to be tested, 24-hour testing a number of times. I eventually started on a medication. There were just a few issues, that I'd get past one hurdle, then I would have to wait for the next hurdle. And so it was eventually, but things were slowly getting resolved. Throughout that period, I read absolutely everything I could find about the process of kidney donation. I learned that some transplanted kidneys, that the recipient will be healthy and fine for many, many years, like as Tom just mentioned. I also learned that there are on occasion when the kidney might fail the day of transplant, and then everything in between those two possibilities were possible. One of the things that made it much easier for me to make the decision or to continue with it was that I knew that Rena took exceptional care of herself. She was doing everything that she possibly could to look after herself, which is why she was able to live 25 years, waiting for a transplant. That if it would be difficult if that person, the potential recipient, did not live as healthy a life, that would be a different decision. But I knew that she was living very, very well. So yeah, I already lived a healthy lifestyle. I eat well. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I exercise quite well. And I knew that all of those things would be in my favor. And finally, I think it was before in December of 2017, we got the green light. I was finally given approval to be a donor, and as the surgery approached, of course, this thing gets very, very real. And of course, it was nerve-wracking in many ways. I never really, there were times that of course, I questioned it. But I had quite a bit of faith that, that my good health and that all of the testing that I'd gone through, it was intended to make sure that it would be as safe as possible for me. There's no guarantees that everything will be, very safe. But I knew that everything had been done to make it as risk-free as possible. I had major surgery, in the years previous, so I had a reasonable idea of what it would be like. I found out probably 2 days before the surgery that I was going to have an open procedure, so it wasn't done laparoscopically, which I was fine with. I just wanted them to be able to see what they were doing. For me, I think it was probably harder on many of my family members than it was on me, and I think it was probably harder on Rena in many ways. And I can quite appreciate that. If I were to see one of my family members going through it, it would be very tough. And I can't remember at what point, probably several months before, as it was getting closer, finally I agreed to tell Rena that I was in the process. I know she knew that there was somebody being tested, but it was a long time before she found out who was being tested. The surgery wasn't terribly difficult. For me, because I wasn't sick, it was a fairly straightforward process. The recovery really wasn't all that difficult, even with an open incision or an open procedure. I was probably, I think, 2 days in the hospital. Of course, there was pain and there was, the incision. I was moving pretty slowly for quite a while. So the recovery wasn't all that different. Probably the worst thing that happened was I had an abscessed tooth, totally unrelated, but I had an abscessed tooth the following week. It hasn't changed my life very significantly. It's one of those things, every now and then I'll see the scar and I think, God, this is bizarre seeing this, because after a while it becomes, it just becomes part of your history. I continue to try and live in as healthy a way, that hasn't changed, and maybe I'm probably a little bit more careful. I am trying to drink more water, like everybody else. I don't take ibuprofen, and there are days when my knees are killing me when I would just dearly love a couple of ibuprofen, but that's just not to be. I'm quite careful about any new drugs or supplements. I have to make sure I make sure that they're safe for somebody with one kidney. Most of those are mainly the things that I've done, how it's affected my life. I am aware that in the future, having one kidney could pose an issue for me. My numbers have been good. My numbers have been good to date, and I'm doing everything. There are no guarantees in life, no matter what we do, and I do everything that I can to make sure that I'm as healthy as possible. I think that's everything I can say, and it's one of those things that was our families, Rena's my first cousin. Our families were always very close, and her mom was very important to me. And it was kind of one of those things, a rare thing that it was kind of rare to be able to do something like that for Rena, but also it felt like for her mom. Even though her mom had passed by then. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Thank you so much to both you, Rena and Cindy. You know, these are the stories we love to hear from both perspectives of being a recipient and a donor. And, you know, this just shows sharing one story. You just never know who might step up to be tested. And in this case, Rena, you can, I guess, thank your sister for being that, you know, advocate, because, you know, and this will probably come up in some of our questions as well, that's not the easy part of it, is putting your story out there. And it's, yeah, sometimes finding a living donor, it's not as easy one, but there are wonderful people to see that they are a match. So thank you both for being with us today. And we hope your upcoming Kidniversary, as I like to call it, will be celebrated hopefully together. So now I would love to open the chat to questions for us to ask the panelists, that sort of thing. And I see, based on what I'm seeing in my chat here, we have a lot to get through, which is fantastic. I had all these other questions prepped, but I should have known that everyone on here would be full of questions today. So we'll hopefully get us through as many as possible, and be able to sort this out with all of our different panelists. So we'll start off kind of from the very beginning there. And this one is, I've been told just as of yesterday, only patients in pre-dialysis can participate in live donor transplants due to COVID. Now, I will probably just quickly answer this one. Of course, COVID is a very challenging time across our country, and every province is dealing with that slightly differently. So what happens in one province might be different to another province at this time. So unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly where this person is located and what's currently happening. To my knowledge, you know, there's deceased donation, live donation, and those are moving forward. And I know here, at least in BC, that hasn't been that it's just live donor transplants for pre-dialysis, but I'm not sure of other parts of the country as well. So check in with your local team. All right. Here's a great question. I'd love to hear more about how transplant patients are feeling re-safety during these times of COVID. Do you feel protected enough with possibly 3 or 4 now boosters, depending again where you are in this country? And how social are you guys being? Anyone from the panelists like to jump on that one? Yeah, Tom, please go ahead.
Well, for me, it is not too much of adjustment, because when you have transplant, I'm always careful around people who have a cold or flu. I always avoid them. So because of that, I was slightly just more adjusted because of COVID. But I still do things that I enjoy. For example, I enjoy walking in a mall. And you know, I'm joking. When I see a crowd of people, I pretend I'm and people just leave. So I find a way to still do things. If when mall were closed, I would just coffee and I just go out to work. I feel good for your mental health. You have to do something. You just cannot sit. So it wasn't too much adjustment, but adjust enough that I follow my nephrologist's advice. I already had a 3 shot and I'm waiting for my 4th booster. So you have to actually listen to doctor advice as well.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Any of the other panelists like to answer that in these interesting times?
Hi. I would say for me, I've definitely made sure to follow all the public health advice to wear my masks and sanitize and that sort of thing. But I do, I have my small group that I can see in person, and I work full time, and I also teach yoga, so I'm at the gym pretty often with that. And the spaces I go, if I don't feel like they're safe spaces, I just don't go there basically. So I socialize where I can safely. Yeah.
Michelle, Cindy, I know Cindy this would be from a donor's perspective, but of course you now have 1 kidney. How are you feeling around COVID and boosters and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I did fairly early on in the pandemic, it became clear that one of the most significant damages done by the virus was to the kidneys. And so that was a bit of a wake-up call to me. Not that I was being very careful anyway. I realized that I wasn't at more risk of getting the disease, but if I got severely ill, then I could be at very significant risk. And so, of course, probably took additional precautions.
Perfect, Cindy. Michelle, how are you feeling? I know this is all very real and your entire journey has almost been during COVID. How are you feeling around this scenario?
I think because I'm so new that I'm being extra careful. I'm very new to immune compromising medications, so we are really not seeing anybody. We're being very safe at the moment. As numbers start to go down, we're hoping that we'll be able to go back to a bubble system and see some close people, but at the moment, being so new out of transplant, it's better to just stay super safe.
Great. Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you all for your answers on that. Next one is I'd like to know if there are peer supports for living donors. My brother hasn't had nearly as much support as I had since my transplant 2 years ago. So peer support for living donors. I know I can speak for here in BC, we have a program for living donors. Now this is as they're getting worked up to become a possible living donor, that we have trained living donors that can speak to their experience, and we're happy to coordinate that. Cindy, I guess this is slightly also for yourself as well. Was there any kind of peer support that you were able to access or had heard about?
No, there wasn't. I had the donor coordinator was very, very much involved for all the time pre-transplant. Post-transplant, there's been relatively little. Now, I don't think I'm in much need of peer support, but it is kind of difficult to know who to ask. That's something I noticed even just immediately after the transplant. Probably even the day I left the hospital, I was told, now go see your family doctor. And sometimes your family doctor is not as knowledgeable about it's not an expert on kidney transplant. So that I would say that was a bit of a kind of a gap.
Perfect. And for those that may or may not have joined us for previous sessions, a big piece, and Tom brought this up in his speech as well, is around the connection of peer support in general. And definitely throughout different branches, Ontario has a very significant peer support program as well that I know they're open to all across the country as well, that there definitely are some great resources and groups out there that would be happy to chat with people, donors, recipients. There's kind of a group for everyone. So I know in the chat there, they've posted for people to check out where they can maybe access those peer supports. All right, we're moving along. Oh, this is specific, and Rena, it's a bit more specific around your gout to indicate that kidney disease. This person was diagnosed a number of years ago with gout, but no mention around kidneys. They didn't get a diagnosis until much later. Is there a newer connection? They did not know there was a possibility and unrelated. I know I had some gout issues as well, but that was it within my journey, and I know it's due to the buildup, and quite often gout unfortunately pops up when things like your kidneys aren't working very well. But I know, Rena, for you, that was your indicator.
Absolutely. And with kidney disease, of course, we're not filtering everything out, and uric acid is the product that gathers usually in lower extremities because of gravity. So for me, it was in my big toe. And they just, because it had repeated, if I'd had it only one time, they wouldn't have picked it up. But because it happened more than once, that was kind of like, there's got to be something else going on here, because I was an otherwise healthy person. And they refer to anybody who fits this category, but close your ears, but they refer to gout as the old man's disease. But this is not a new thing. That was 28 years ago. So yeah, they just picked it up, I guess.
And I think everyone's journey, as we see, is very different in how our bodies and what are possible indicators. Most people I meet, everyone, there's a few commonalities, but there's many differences as well. So it can be different from one person to the other. All right. Oh, here's a great one. It would be fun to have everyone tell us the name of their new kidney for those that are transplanted. So, who would like to start off with sharing if they have a nickname for their kidney?
Well, my new kidney is named after my donor, so it's my Cindy kidney. She may not know that. Did you know that? Yeah, that's what it is.
Perfect. And Tom or Michelle, do you guys have nicknames for your kidneys or your new kidney?
Well, I enjoy humor, and so I named Kitty Jerry. I used to watch Tom and Jerry on TV, and they were rascal, and so my kidney is Jerry. And I had a funny story. I don't know if some might be offended, but it's a funny story. One of them is that I received kidney from the female, and I was wondering what would be different. Only side effect they were saying that is I might have to go to bathroom and sit down.
Oh.
It's only
Oh, Tom, thanks for sharing. And Michelle, do you have one? You're fresh. So what's happening with have you come up with a name yet?
I haven't named my kidney, but I am open to suggestions if anyone has anything they'd like to write in the chat.
Amazing. Thanks, Michelle. I know that was definitely part of my donor was my husband, and that was part of our process. And so we decided we took our initials, so B and K, so it's BK. And that's also Brian's kidney was, it all kind of came together. So ours was called BK. So there you go. Some of our kidneys are named and some still to come. So that's fantastic. All right. Okay. Oh, this might be slightly directed to me. I'd like to hear more about the process of pregnancy post-transplant. So yes, I'll quickly, and I'm happy to this individual to reach out independently to go through this more, but it was definitely in part of my journey, a very important piece around that was one of my goals post-transplant because I couldn't before. And my team was very much on board. Of course, there was the full waiting period of a year after transplant to make sure things were stable. And then following that, we were able to move forward with medication changes and that sort of thing. And things didn't happen immediately. But very, very fortunate about a year after, we were able to get pregnant, and I was able to get to about 35, almost 36 weeks with my daughter. So she was early, but you'd never know it. And, really no health complications. And I've been able to recover, thankfully, very well from that. So I'm very thankful for my journey so far and the ability that my gift from my donor has allowed me to now bring a little life into this world. So, but happy to touch base with this person individually as well. All right, I see there's lots of different chats happening on both sides. Sorry, everyone, I'm trying to keep on both sides here. As a transplant recipient, how has COVID affected you? This person received a kidney pancreas, their significant other received a kidney pancreas transplant 2 years ago, and you're finding that they're overprotected and stressed around it, and now has the 4 doses of that sort of thing. So I know a few of you guys have touched on that about is there, a big and an overarching of this conversation here today is around mental well-being. And, as we've heard from previous sessions, there is a huge, and Michelle, you touched base as you went through your journey here, there's a big component around this of mental wellness as you go through and adding a pandemic in there. Would you guys like to touch base about how you keep well and maybe try not to stress about it as much as you can, and what you're doing to keep mentally well? Yes, Tom. And Tom, if you can just speak a little louder into your microphone. There's just a few people that have had trouble hearing you, but please go ahead.
Okay. What I do is during this pandemic, because I happen to be more at home than usual, I started learning Spanish language, so that kept me busy. And I love ballroom dancing, so I use a broom and I practice ballroom dancing. This occupies me as well. And I love ballroom dancing. So you have to find something that you enjoy, whether it's reading the book, whether it's something. And I think for mental stress, you do what you enjoy. And this is me.
Amazing. Thank you, Tom. We'd love to see, I think, a video of you ballroom dancing.
Oh, don't make me laugh.
Lovely. Michelle, Rena, Cindy, any perspective on that?
I know, well, for me, I tend to be a really busy person. I don't I don't relax enough, but my yoga practice, I teach yoga and meditate, and those two things keep my head together for the most part. Um, and occasional bouts of depression, which I've had my whole life, and I've just learned to kind of, either use that meditation or yoga, and if that's not helping, to distract myself with something else that is meaningful for me, um, and just being able to connect with people as well. So stay connected, even if it is online or something. And I know we're all kind of sick of online get-togethers and whatnot, but even if it is that, to stay in touch with my family, especially because they're the most important for me. But yeah, I would say that's how I keep up.
Perfect. Thank you, Rena. Michelle, is there any? I know you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but
Yeah, I've been reading and going for my daily mental health walk. I think that getting outside has definitely been helpful. I'm walking a little bit slower, but getting outside definitely helps.
amazing. Yeah, the outdoors, right? That's a huge component for overall. And, the wintertime can be a bit more challenging for that. But, finding those alternatives are super important around that. Any other comments around that one? So we have a few very specific questions in the chat, which we might type back individually to those individuals around a few different things. Interesting question here. Do donors have regular renal clinic visits and checkups? Cindy, I guess that's to you there.
I don't go to the renal clinic. It's through my family doctor, but I do get, in fact, I have one scheduled, and COVID has interrupted some of that. Getting blood work done has been a little bit more difficult. I do have, I was on every 3 months having my blood work taken, and now I'm on a 6-month rotation of getting that taken. I am taking part in, there's a study going on in my local area with donors. I think it's going to be a long-term study. And so my family doctor will do additional testing with me each year to look at all the different markers for kidney function.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing that. And, again, the donor process from province to province can slightly alter, but usually there is at least the blood work and that sort of thing. I think some additional support to our living donors is super essential as well as we continue to grow and develop and better our systems as a whole. Yeah, it's great to see that there is some clinic, keeping up and checking in with our donors as well. Super important. So we have a specific, of course, all of our journeys are very different when it comes to donation and, possibly having to put your story out there and sharing what's happening. And, Cindy and Rena shared how, Rena's sister kind of put forward the story more so than herself. And Cindy kind of went through the process of quieter. And there are times that, of course, people are very in touch with their donors along the way. And sometimes there's pros and cons to that, of course. And this individual has asked kind of around, someone had stepped forward to be a possible donor. There'd been some time in between for multiple different reasons. And now there's kind of been things need to move forward and there's not been a response. Have any of you guys as recipients gone through that process where you were kind of hopeful on a donor possibly, and you knew what was going on, and they were able, and then things kind of halted? Was there any, because that can be a huge kind of, your mental well-being can be affected by that. Any reflection on that from our panelists?
I don't have personal experience with that, but it is something that I prepared myself for. I have read lots of Facebook posts and groups about people's donors backing out, and then the friendship or the the bond between family kind of getting skewed. So I was very open to anyone that discussed the application process with me that if you want to back out, please do it before we get to the hospital on surgery day, but there would be no hard feelings. Like it's a really big ask, and it's something that you just have to prepare yourself for, that maybe someone really thinks that they can do it and then at the last minute they can't, and you can't really be upset with them for it.
No, that's a really great point, Michelle, as well. I know I can reflect on my own journey as well, that I knew there was a number of people getting tested as well. I did know that who ended up being my donor, exactly where they were in their journey. And that sometimes was a bad thing, actually, in that sense that I remember they communicated to me that they thought that I had put all my eggs in their one basket, and my hope was on them. And if it didn't move forward, I'd have to go to dialysis. And it made me really step back and reflect that, I, of course, did not want that on my donor to feel that way. And that was something for myself going through the process of, knowing that, things can change over time with that. And that, really just continuing to share your story is the biggest thing whenever I talk to people that are going through this in whatever way that is, through a family member, through social media, letting people know where you are in your journey, and then allowing them to move forward with it. Just knowing the process, will possibly take different turns at times, and to take it all in stride as best as we can, and taking care of ourselves as well. So any other comments or suggestions around moving forward in that process? Yes, Tom.
Regarding living donors, sometimes, in my experience, you have to be careful not to ask directly, because you don't know personal feeling about organ donation or if there's willing. And it might, if you ask directly and that person is not ready to give, it get family tension or family. So my suggestion is put on a plate and tell everyone you need kidney, and those who are willing will come forward.
Yes, absolutely. Sharing that story and I know that, reflecting of people that I speak to all the time, it definitely can be a huge challenge sort of thing. And it's just finding the way that works for you as an individual going through this piece. Now, this question is directed to our recipients. Have you had any major reactions to your immunosuppressant drugs? That's a big piece as part of your post-transplant, is the medication. It keeps us going the way that we are. Have you guys had any issues that have come up, and how have you dealt with those?
I've had a number of issues, actually. In the beginning, I lost a great deal of hair. It's all back now, but I was like, oh my God, I'm losing all my hair. So that happened in the beginning. I've had diarrhea for many years. Sorry, but that's one of the things that has happened. And that has taken years, like a full 3 years to resolve. So there's been a lot of weight loss and, just stuff like that that's been going on. My appetite is different than it used to be. Cindy assures me it's not because of her. No, I'm kidding. But there's been, and I have a tremendously bad tremor, which some people interpret as nervousness. So if I'm sitting across from somebody in a professional setting, they often think I'm nervous, which means that I have to tell them I just have a tremor because I can see them the way they're looking at me. Yeah. So those are the big ones for me.
Thank you, Rena. That's thank you for sharing that. Tom, I'm sure you've have multiple years worth of immunosuppressant drugs. What are the things that you've experienced, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, my personal experience is not knowing. Like now, you go Google, you can find everything about everything. There's a lot of information about meds, side effects. At that time, I didn't ask. For example, one side effect of prednisone is anger. I would be mad at my family for no reason. I just didn't understand. Just lately, or maybe last 5-10 years, that I realized, wow, those were the side effects. And sadly enough, my family suffer. Didn't know why, but they would suffer. I'm trying to make up now by taking them on trips or cottages. So But it's a real big difference of knowledge. One of the things I said in my speech is that there were ways to thank the donor. I didn't know. I was new in a country. I was petrified. What is happening to me? So knowledge is, for me, it's a big thing to know the side effect. And at least if the family knows your side effect, they can back up or understand you.
Yes, thank you, Tom. And that's the thing, everyone will experience, their post recovery in a different way. And it's always important to continue to talk with your medical team that if there are things that you're just like, this doesn't seem like me right now, or whatever it may be, the hair loss, the tremors, the anger, those are things to talk to through your team around what medications you're taking and that sort of thing as well. So if you can believe it, we're at the end of the session. I can't, we're here already. So we hope that everyone enjoyed this conversation. I know we weren't able to we have over 19 question and answers in our session there. So I'm sorry we didn't get to it. I think we touched base on a lot of pieces, but thank you so much for being part of this session. A huge shout out to Michelle, Tom, Rena, and Cindy for your time today, sharing your stories, involvement, and your journey with kidney transplant.